Hi guys, I hope you've all had a great semester. Miss you all, miss Kansas. But here's my video on my lesson for 15 to 20 minute lesson at the end of the class. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get started in on that. Oh, and today my audience is my husband Corey. He's hiding in the corner. If you come and oh, there he is. See, he does exist. He's a real person. So my husband's gonna be the audience. Audience/class. He's going to hopefully answer the question properly. He's been being a goofball already. So I'm just going to dive right on into this. Okay, so today we're going to learn about perfect squares. Not perfect squares. We're going to learn about how to complete the squares, which we're going to need to know how to do perfect squares with that. We're going to do completing the squares. So as a review, we are going to go over some perfect squares, some well-known perfect squares. So what is 2 squared?
4.
Good job, Corey. It is 4. And then my next example is, what is 6 squared?
30.
Good job. And then on this last one, I'm going to ask you to come up to the board and write it. What does 12 squared equal? Good job. It's 144 with the smiley face on top. So that's a review on perfect squares. Our next step with this is reviewing how to take the square root. So we're going to start off with a pretty regular one. What is the square root of 25?
5.
Corey says 5. What does everyone else think? Because, see, our problem here is,
Corey can do math.
no, the numerical value is correct. We have positive 5, but we also have the answer of negative 5. And we know that because 5 squared equals 25. And what does negative 5 squared equal? Nope, it equals positive 25. And so that's why we need to have both the addition and the subtraction on that. So now we're going to get into something a little more harder with that. And just as a review, what is the square root of 8? Because there is no perfect square for the square root of 8. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this apart. One of the numbers, so we're going to multiply 2 numbers together, and one of them is going to be a perfect square. So 8, square root of 8, is the same thing as taking the square root of 4 times the square root of 2, just like that. So now what we can do is take the square root of our 4, which would be 2, and we still multiply it by the square root of 2. And, like before, we still can't forget our plus and our negative to root 2. So both of those will be the answer to the square root of 8. So now that we've gone through that review, we are going to get into how to complete the square. So first, I want to know, what is the quadratic form? We've worked with that already in class a little bit. We know what that is. We've done things with the quadratic formula and such. So we know that that formula is ax squared plus bx plus c, all of that equals 0. So we have this. And say we want to find the value of x. Completing the square is another form or way to help us with that. So, and it's depending on what type of problem you have, it can be easier and more time effective than actually going through the quadratic formula of negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all of that over 2ac. So we have this instead, and this one we're trying to get into the form of x plus or minus some number, which is we're going to see later, it's b all over 2, all of that number squared, plus or minus some other constant d. And it's not the same constant as this c, it's going to be a little different. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But this is the form that we're looking for at the end. So, to get started, I'm going to show you how to do it like with ax squared plus bx plus c. I'm going to go through those steps, and then we're going to go through an actual example problem, and then after that I'll show you a couple other forms that we might deal with later. So, back to this. The first thing that we're going to do, first we're going to assume that a equals 1. We always have to have this number as a constant. We always have to have it be the value 1. So then we rewrite that as x squared plus bx plus c, all of that equals 0. Our next step is, could I have the purple marker? Thank you. Our next step is to move this c over to the other side. So what do we have to do for that? We have to subtract the c. And we have minus c, and that can be rewritten as x squared plus bx equals negative c. Okay, so we have that. That's all well and good. Could I have the blue? Purple. So now we have a blank here and a blank here. We want to fix that. We need to have a constant in here. Because remember, we're trying to get to this. This is what we want. So once we're here, we grab this constant and we go b divided by 2 and we square it. Okay? So we have plus b all over 2 squared, and what we do to one side, of course, we have to do to the other. Oh, there should be a square there. So b all over 2 squared. So that's how we get to there. Now, if we look at this, if I could have a third color, please. It's not the light blue. And now, so we have this form. If we look at this, we can break this down a little bit. And we can go x plus, and again, we take this b constant, and we go b all over 2 goes into this slot. And then we have to square all this. And this side still equals negative c plus b all over 2 squared. And so that's how, and this negative c plus b all over 2 squared, we're just calling that our d. So this portion equals that d. If you want to make sure you did this correctly, what you do is you come here and we're going to FOIL it out. So we have x plus b all over 2 times x plus b all over 2. Correct? That's what x plus b over 2 squared equals, isn't it? We just have two of them, multiplying them. So then, what we do, we're going to FOIL them. So we have x squared plus b all over 2x plus another b all over 2x plus, so we're multiplying these two together, so we have b squared all over 4. Okay, yeah. So then, to reduce this a little bit, clean it up. We have x squared plus 2bx all over 2 plus, if we do this, this is the same thing as b all over 2 squared. And then looking at this even further, we can cancel that 2 with that 2, and we end up with x squared plus bx plus b all over 2 squared, which is this, not the exact same thing as this. So they all end up equaling each other. So that shows you how we got from here to here, which is the same thing as this. So I've shown that, and I've just shown it with arbitrary numbers. You can plug in anything for A, B, and C and get there. So now I'm going to give you an actual example. I'm going to erase all this. I hope everyone got that in their notes. Okay, so our example I'm going to do is x squared plus 6x minus 7, all of that equaling 0. So first thing we want to do, check to make sure our a value is 1, which it is. And then our next step, if we remember, is to move this constant back over to the right side. So what we do is we add 7 to one side, and we add 7 to the other. And then that gives us the new equation. X squared plus 6x, all of that equals 7. And then, of course, we're going to have our empty slots here. And so to find those, remember, we take this b, our 6 is our b, so it's b all over 2 squared. So if we want to plug our 6 in for our b squared, so 6 all over 2 squared is the same thing as 3 squared, which is the same thing as 9. So now we're going to add 9 to both sides. You always have to remember that. You want to add it to both sides, not just one. So now that that step is done, we now want to put it into our parentheses, our x plus a number, all of that squared. And for us, that'll be x plus 3 squared. And if we combine these, what do we get? We get the number 16. So we have this. Let's go, hey, I want to check it. I want to make sure this is the same as this. I want to make sure I did my math right. So then we have x plus 3 and x plus 3, which equals x squared plus 3x plus another 3x plus 9, which is the same thing as x squared plus 6x plus 9. So yes, they do equal each other. After that, we now want to find our x's. This is all well and good. We reduced it to an easy form to work with, but we want to work with it. We want to do things with it. So, this way we can find some zeros, minimums, maximums, that sort of thing. But today we're just learning how to compute, and tomorrow we'll get into minimums and maximums and those sort of things. So, let me erase some of this. So we have this. From here, we need to get x on its own. So we need to take the square root of both sides. So, great, we have x plus 3 equals square root of 16 is plus or minus 4. So all of a sudden, things happened and got weird. We have a positive and a negative 4 we need to deal with. So in my head, I like to break it into 2 separate equations and just deal with them separately. So this then turns into x plus 3 equals a positive 4, and x plus 3 equals negative 4. And then from here we want to solve for our x's. So we need to subtract 3 from both sides here. So we have x equals 1. And then we need to subtract 3 again. And we have x equals negative 7. So okay, we have those. Let's check to make sure we have the right numbers. We did our work right. So we take the 1, plug it back up in here to our original equation. So this turns into 1 squared plus 6 times 1 minus 7. So this is 1 plus 6 minus 7, which is 0, which is what we're looking for. And now we have an x equals negative 7. We bring that up. Negative 7 squared plus 6 times negative 7 minus 7 equals 0. This is 49 plus 40, whoop, getting backwards here, minus 42 minus 7 equals 0, which is what we were looking for. So good job, guys. We ended up finding the correct values for x. So there's a normal case of completing the square. Other cases we may end up having that you need to be on the lookout for are things like, so we may end up with 2x squared plus 12x minus 14, all of that equals 0. If we look, our first check we needed to do is make sure that this is a 1. It is most definitely not a 1, it's a 2. So, to get that to be a 1, we want to divide by 2. So there's dividing by 2. And so then all of this turns into x squared plus 6x minus 7, all of that equals 0. And once again, we're back to the original equation that we just solved a couple minutes ago. So there's that. There's that case. And then another case we may run into is negative x squared minus 12x plus 14 equals 0. Okay, so obviously this is a negative one, not a positive one. We would like to have a positive one. So what we do is we take the whole equation and we multiply it by negative 1, which is the same thing as x squared plus 12x minus 14, all of that equals 0. And then you'll go through your steps again and get your value, you'll get your value for completing the square, and then from there you can then do your math and find your values for x's. So that's all I have for today. The bell's about to ring. Tonight, when you have some free time, I have a short quiz on Socrative. It's already up and going. This is the room number. If you'll go on to that, and it's a 5-question quiz, should be simple if you paid attention in class today. Go do it. If you do it, I'll give you points. If you don't do it, I won't give you points. Capiche? Okay. Have a great day, guys.